من لا نبي بعد نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اقتفى أثره واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Inshallah, we'll pick back up with the book known as al-Awsat fi sunani wal-ijma'i wal-ikhtilaf, the book known as the medium-sized book regarding the sunan and the consensus and the disagreement of the scholars. It's written by Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Ibrahim ibn al-Mundhir, rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 318 after the Hijrah. And we're in the chapter that he says, Dhikrul wudu bil ma al-hamim. What has been mentioned regarding making wudu with al-ma, water that is al-hamim, hot water, or that which has been mentioned regarding making wudu with hot water, water that is hot or water that has been heated, And the author, he presents this chapter after the chapter regarding making wudu with water from the sea. And perhaps the reason behind this is when we talked about the disagreement of the people regarding making wudu from, or the disagreement of the people of knowledge regarding making wudu from seawater or with seawater, we mentioned that the majority of the people deem that it's permissible and valid to make wudu with seawater. But there was a statement mentioned by Abdullah bin Amr ibn al-As where he disliked or disapproved of making wudu with seawater. And he mentioned that underneath our sea, there was a fire, and underneath that fire, there's a sea, and underneath that sea, there's a fire, until he mentioned 7 seas and 7 fires. And the point of it is that somebody might say, well, why is that relevant in mentioning that he disliked using seawater? And it could be equated to this disagreement as well, which is the disagreement regarding using heated water or water that has been heated up or hot water. Should one make wudu with hot water? And as a general rule of thumb, although this is the issue that is disagreed about, the general rule of thumb is that one should avoid using extremely hot water or extremely cold water to where it limits the individual's ability to be proficient and complete in their wudu. So if the water is too hot to make a correct wudu, or if the water is too cold to make a correct wudu, then one should avoid it. But the conversation here is going to be more centered on what if the water has just been heated using fire generally, and you can add to that fire that its fuel is something that is impermissible more exclusively. What is the ruling of making wudu in such circumstances? So you have water that is just naturally warm, water that has been heated using fire or some other source to where it's not naturally warm, but it's been heated up. And then water that is heated up using something that is impermissible, right? The fire is fueled by something that is impermissible. And then at the limits of it, you have water that is too hot to use, or so hot that it reduces the effectiveness of using it or the ability to use it effectively. So these are some of the different levels regarding this conversation. And we're going to see what some of the people of knowledge have said about using water that has been heated. And that's what this chapter is about. And like we said, this is perhaps why the author mentions it after the disagreement of the people of knowledge regarding making wudu with seawater, because those who disapproved of the seawater, like Abdullah bin Amr ibn al-As, perhaps they disapproved of it for this reason, i.e. the reason that in their view, the seawater is a water that has been heated and been subject to flame, and therefore it was disliked or invalid because of such. So what is this topic? Ibn al-Mundhir rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, ذِكْرُ الْوُضُوءِ بِالْمَاءِ الْحَمِيمِ. What has been mentioned regarding using water, al-ma, that is al-hamim. And al-hamim, Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that it is hot water, al-ma'ul har. And it can also be al-ma al-musakhan, water that has been heated up, right? It's been caused to boil, boiled water, water that has been boiled. And so Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, قال الله جل ذكره فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا الآية فالماء المسخن داخل في جملة المياه التي أمر الناس أن يتطهروا بها. Ibn al-Mundhir rahimahullah ta'ala, he begins by reverting us back to the principle and to the foundation, that ayat that we said is super important as it relates to the conversation of water, and wudu specifically, the ayat in Surah al-Ma'idah, where Allah Azza wa Jal, he says, Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, قال الله جل ذكره فلم تجدوا ماء فتيمموا. Right? If you can't find any water, then seek out clean earth. And so this ayah, Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that boiled water is included in the generality of all of the waters, or any of the waters that the people have been commanded to purify themselves using it. Right? This statement, فَلَمْ تَجِدُوا مَاءً, then it includes all types of waters, including boiled water or heated water. Now, so to Ibn al-Mundhir, this principle covers all types of waters except that which there is evidence for exclusion, and water that has been heated is water, and so it's included in the statement of Allah. And if you don't find any water, and so heated water is still water, so it is not permissible to abandon it and go to its alternative in tayammum. And so this is the foundation that Ibn al-Mundhir is basing the first view upon. He adds to that, he says, وَرُوِينَا عَنِ النَّبِيِّ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ أَنَّهُ قَالَ الصَّعِيدُ الطَّيِّبُ وُضُوءُ الْمُسْلِمِ وَإِنْ لَمْ يَجِدُ الْمَاءَ 10 سِنِينَ فإذا وجد الماء فليمسه بشرته فإن ذلك خير. This hadith is well known, and Ibn al-Mundhir, he's going to produce his chain for it. But it's the hadith where he says that we've reported that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, clean earth is the wudu of the Muslim. And even if he can't find water for 10 years, but when he finds water, then he must let it touch his skin. Indeed, that is goodness, or that is good, or better, or, from the affairs of good. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, clean earth is the wudu of the Muslim, i.e. clean earth is the way the Muslim purifies and makes his situation good. Al-wada'a, from wada'a, it means to make al-hasan, to make good, and to make clean. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, clean earth or pure earth, good earth, is the way the Muslim makes himself clean, even if he doesn't find water for 10 years. So if you're in a situation where water is absent, or you're unable to use water, even if the period was as long as 10 years or longer, then you can still use the clean earth or the good earth to purify yourself. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, but when he finds al-ma, and the alif and lam in this sentence, al-ma libayan al-jins, it's to clarify the category. And so it's as if he's saying, but once he finds water, i.e. any water, then he must let it touch his skin. فَلْيَمَسَّهُ بَشَرَةً. then he must wipe it or rub it or let it touch his skin, because that is good. That is from the good qualities and the good character of the religion. And so this hadith shows us that once you have water, you can no longer use tayammum, because tayammum is only allowable in the absence of water. And if we said al-ma, the alif and lam here represents category or type, then therefore hot water is included in the category or amongst the types of water. Here he goes on, he's going to mention his chain, but before that he mentions some of the people who holds the view that he has. And so he says, وَمِمَّنْ رُوِينَا عَنْهُ أَنَّهُ رَأَى الْوُضُوءَ بِالْمَاءِ الْمُسَخَّنِ عُمَرْ وابن عمر وابن عباس وأنس بن مالك. وممن روينا عنه أنه رأى الوضوء بالماء المسخن عمر. I'm trying to get the i'rab of that. وممن روينا عنه عمر خبر. نعم. عمر وابن عمر وابن عباس وأنس بن مالك. Or مبتدا actually. نعم. نعم. So he says, and from those who we have narrated that they used to see, i.e. the permissibility or the acceptability of making wudu with heated or boiled water, was Umar, as well as Ibn Umar and Ibn Abbas and Anas ibn Malik. All of these Sahaba shared the view or held the view that boiled water is valid in wudu. He mentions his chain. He says, حدثنا محمد بن عبد الله قال أخبرنا بن وهب قال حدثني هشام بن سعد وحفص بن ميسرة عن زيد بن أسلم عن أبيه أن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنه كان يتوضأ ويغتسل بالحميم. He says that Muhammad ibn Abdullah narrated to us. He said that Ibn Wahab informed us. He said that Hisham ibn Sa'd narrated to me, as well as Hafs ibn Maysarah, on the authority of Zayd ibn Aslam, on the authority of his father, that Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he used to make wudu and bathe with hamim, with hot water or with boiled water, with boiling water, right? With water that has been heated up. And this is, especially relevant nowadays when this is a trait that all of us have here in the West specifically. All of us have the ability to have hot and cold water at our disposal whenever we wish. We can turn the water faucet onto the hot side or onto the cold side. But this was not something that was readily available at all periods throughout time. And the water could be subject to the conditions surrounding it. So cold water would a lot of times be because of cold environments, and hot water would be because of warm environments. But one thing a person could do is if they had cold or room temperature water, they could heat it up. And this is what is the hamim, heating up the water. And so Umar, he would bathe and he would make wudu with such water. And so there is a salaf in using warm water to make wudu, or heated water to make wudu. He says, حدثنا موسى بن هارون قال حدثنا عثمان بن طالوت قال حدثنا الحسين بن حفص قال حدثنا هشام بن سعد عن زيد بن أسلم عن أبيه أنه قال كان لي عمر قمقم يسخن فيه الماء فيتوضأ. He says that Musa bin Harun narrated to us. He said that Uthman ibn Talut narrated to us. He said that Al-Husayn ibn Hafs narrated to us. He said that Hisham ibn Sa'd narrated to us on the authority of Zayd ibn Aslam, on the authority of his father, who said that Umar used to have a qamqam. And a qamqam is like a jug or a pitcher or a container that he used to boil water in, and then he would make wudu from it, right? He had a container or a jug he would allow to get hot, either on the coals or on an open flame. And when the water was heated, he would make wudu from that water. He says, حدثنا إسحاق and Abdul Razzaq and Ma'mar and Ayyub and Nafi and Ibn Umar رضي الله تعالى عنهما كان يتوضأ بالماء الحميم. He says that Ishaq narrated to us on the authority of Abdul Razzaq, on the authority of Ma'mar, on the authority of Ayyub, on the authority of Nafi', that Ibn Umar, radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma, he used to make wudu with water that was hamim, i.e. with boiled or heated water. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, أخبرنا إسحاق عن عبد الرزاق عن ابن جريج أنه قال أخبرني عطاء أنه سمع ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما يقول لا بأس بأن يغتسل بالماء الحميم ويتوضأ. He says that Ishaq informed us. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that Ishaq informed us on the authority of Abdul Razak, on the authority of Ibn Jurayj, who said that Ata, yani Ata ibn Abi Rabah, informed me that he heard Ibn Abbas saying there's no harm if someone bathes in water that is hamim, or if they make wudu from it. Right? So this is Ibn Abbas saying there's no harm in somebody bathing in hot water or making wudu from it, i.e. heated water. And the reason why somebody might have some reservation about it, as we mentioned, there are levels to what we're talking about heated water. So we could talk about water that is just naturally warm. It hasn't been heated. It just comes from its source naturally warm, like a hot spring, or, you know, water that has been allowed to sit out and the sun has caused it to get hot, like how we might have water in our cars nowadays, a bottle of water sitting in a car, a closed car, and when we come back in a summer day, the water is now hot. Some people disliked it because they claimed that it caused leprosy, that the warm water, the hot water, causes leprosy. And that's not even just because it was heated up using fire or coal or some other fuel, just because the hot water itself does that. And so that was perhaps one reason why people might have had some trepidation about it. Another argument could be, well, when the water is heated, i.e. using some secondary fuel or some fuel to get it warm and to boil it, it has changed from its natural state. And so when we talked about al-ma' al-mutlaq, or unqualified water, then that's that water that hasn't changed from the way that Allah has created it. And so if you took regular water and heated it up, then perhaps this water, one might try to argue that it has changed from its regular state. Another reason why somebody might have a problem with it is if the water was heated using an impermissible fuel source, or a fire that was fueled with something impermissible. Like, for example, if you use I'm just trying to think of something that would be practical, because it's easy to say like something stolen that ignites the fire. You steal somebody's, you know, Kindle. But like, you know, if you used like pig flesh, or, you know, something impermissible, some type of impermissible fuel substance, and that fuel, when it's heating the fire and producing the smoke, maybe the smoke gets into the water and causes it, or mixes with it, and this would be a small amount of water in their view mixing with something najis, because they don't we'll talk about they might consider that smoke is something that can mix with the water and cause it to be najis. Or they might say, we're not sure, that maybe as the fire is crackling and shooting sparks and dispersing, you know, pieces of the fuel and that which the fire is consuming and burning, maybe some of those particles got into the water. This is a third reason why somebody might have might be off-put a little bit by heated water. And a fourth reason could be what we mentioned as well, which is it prevents an individual from making a quality wudu. And so this might be the reasons, and all of them are slightly different and for slightly different reasons and slightly different scenarios. But these could be some of the reasons why somebody would say that wudu with heated water would be disliked, or maybe even impermissible. But Ibn Abbas is saying, no, there's la bas. There's no harm in using or bathing in water that has been heated or making wudu from it. As far as if it's naturally heated, then the reality is that it's not been proven to cause leprosy. And so the excuse that somebody might use that warm or hot water causes leprosy, there's no foundation for this. As far as if it's heated using a fuel source, then and that it's the change has occurred in the water, then the change that is relevant from taking water out of its absolute state to a qualified state is the changing of its taste, color, or smell, and not its temperature. So that argument becomes irrelevant. If the argument is that perhaps maybe some of the najasa has gotten into the fire, or that the smoke, gotten into the water, or that the smoke mixes with the water if it's uncovered, or perhaps even if it's covered and you're not sure, then the reality of it is that smoke is not najis, and the substance has changed. A transformation that we call istihala, or changing from one substance to another, and smoke is not najis. Secondly, the possibility of particles getting into the water, we don't rule on possibilities, we rule on certainties. And so therefore, until you're certain that something najis has altered the quality of the water, then there's no ruling for it being najis. And as far as it being something that prevents a person from making a quality wudu, then we might still say this argument. If you can't make a quality wudu because of it, then get water that you can, because that which a wajib is not accomplishable except by way of it, then that thing itself is also wajib. Any circumstance, the gist of it is that here we have a statement of Ibn Abbas, rahimahullah ta'ala, along with Umar's action and Ibn Umar's action, stating for us clearly that there's no harm in using heated or boiled water. Ibn al-Mundhir, he mentions the next narration. He says, حدثنا إسماعيل بن قتيبة قال حدثنا أبو بكر قال حدثنا حماد بن مسعدة أن يزيد مولى سلمة أن سلمة كان يسخن له الماء فيتوضأ به. And who is this Salama to? Is Salama to bin al-Aqwa'? I don't know. I have to find out now. Yazid Mawla Salama. And this is a tricky circumstance here, because when they only tell you the name of the freer, then how many possibilities could he have when you look him up? Yazid Mawla Salama. Who is he? Yazid ibn Abi Ubaid, Abu Khalid Yazid ibn Abi Ubaid, al-Madani al-Aslami, Mawla Salama ibn al-Aqwa'. Yes, so Salamatu ibn al-Aqwa' radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and Yazid's name is Yazid ibn Abi Ubaid ibn Abi Ubaid. Naam. So Ibn al-Mundhir, he says that Ismail ibn Qutaybah, he narrated to us. He said that Abu Bakr narrated to us. He said that Hamad ibn Mas'ada narrated to us on the authority of Yazid, the freed slave of Salama, yani Salama ibn al-Aqwa' radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, or rahimahullah. Salama ibn al-Aqwa'. Now I'm confused. Yeah, Salama ibn al-Aqwa' min al-Mu'ammarin min al-Sahaba. Yeah, he was from those who lived long from the Sahaba. Sahibu Thulathiyat in a lot of circumstances. Salamatu ibn al-Aqwa'. Not that one. Salamatu ibn Amr ibn al-Aqwa'. سلمة بن عمرو بن الأكوع الأسلمي أبو مسلم أبو إياس شهد بيعة الرضوان مات سنة 74. Now, So Salama ibn al-Aqwa, Yazid, his free slave, said that Salama, he used to have water that would be heated up for him, and then he would make wudu from it. Salama ibn Amr ibn al-Aqwa. Now, so this is another Sahabi that he mentions. He says, حدثنا محمد بن نصر قال حدثنا محمد بن يحيى قال حدثنا أبو نعيم قال حدثنا راشد بن معبد الواسطي قال رأيت الماء يسخن لأنس بن مالك في الشتاء ثم يغتسل به يوم الجمعة. He says that Muhammad ibn Nasr narrated to us. He said that Muhammad ibn Yahya narrated to us. He said that Abu Nu'aym narrated to us. He said that Rashid ibn Ma'bad al-Wasiti said, I saw water being boiled for Anas ibn Malik during the winter. And then he would bathe using it on the day of Jumu'ah. Meaning Malik ibn Anas, radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he would have water heated up for him that he could bathe from the ghusl of Yawm al-Jumu'ah. Right? So these are all Sahaba that have held this view that it's permissible to use boiled water to make wudu. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, وَهُوَ مَذْهَبُ عَطَاء وَالْحَسَنِ وَأَبِي وَائِلْ وَكَذَا قَالَ كُلُّ مَنْ نَحْفَظُ عَنْهُ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْمَدِينَةِ وَأَهْلِ الْكُوفَةِ وكذلك قال الشافعي وأبو عبيد وذكر أنه قول أهل الحجاز والعراق جميعا. Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, this is also the madhab of Ata ibn Abi Rabah, the Imam of Mecca, as well as Al-Hasan, Hasan al-Basri, the Imam of Basra, as well as Abi Wa'il, Abu Wa'il, Shaqiq ibn Salama. If I'm not mistaken, Abu Wa'il is Shaqiq ibn Salama, a famous tabi'i. Shaqiq ibn Salama, Abu Wa'il al-Asadi, Abu al-Kufi, thiqatun mukhadram. He died in the Khilaf of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and he was 100 years old. Right? Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was the Khalifa from 99 to 101 or 98 to 101. And Salama ibn al-Aqwa, he died during his Khilafah, and he was 100 years old. So he would have been born at around the time of the Hijrah, right? So he was a tabi'i who was alive during the time of the Prophet, a famous tabi'i, Abi Wa'il, Shaqiq ibn Salama. And so this was the madhab of, from the people of Kufa, right? From the students of Ali and things like this. So he said that this was the madhab of Ata, as well as Al-Hasan, as well as Abi Wa'il. And likewise, this was stated by everybody. This is the statement of Ibn al-Mundhir. He says this was the view of everybody who we have learned from them or preserved their knowledge from the people of knowledge from Ahl al-Medina, the people of Medina, right? When you talk about the scholars of Medina, like the Fuqaha as-Sab'a, right, and those who are added on with them, and then from the Atba' Tabi'in, like Malik and things like this, these are the people of Medina, as well as the people of Kufa, like Ibn Mas'ud and Ali and Abu Musa and other than them, and then from the Tabi'in, like Al-Qama and Al-Aswad, and then from the Atba' Tabi'in, like Al-Nakha'i, and then Abu Hanifa and Al-Thawri. And likewise, this was also the statement of Ash-Shafi'i, as well as Abu Ubaid al-Qasim ibn Salam, right? Abu Ubaid al-Qasim ibn Salam, he has a whole book in the topic of purification called Kitaab al-Tahur, right? It's a good book, a very classical book in the affairs of purification, water, and things of this nature. Likewise, this was also mentioned by Abu Ubaid. He said that it is the view of all of the people of Hijaz, right? The people of Mecca, Medina, Ta'if, Jeddah, all of this is known as al-Hijaz, as well as the people of Iraq, Kufa, Basra, Wasat, all of those places, Mosul, all of them had this view. So, like we say, when it comes to making wudu with warm or heated or boiled water, there's not much disagreement in it. But we did mention some people had problems with it. And you'll see it in some of the books of Islamic law, people who mention it to be disliked to use wudu from heated water. And it goes back to one of those four views that we mentioned, one of those four reasons that we mentioned. And to this effect, Ibn al-Mundhir, he says, وَرُوِينَ عَنْ مُجَاهِدْ أَنَّهُ كَرِهَ الْوُضُوء بِالْمَاءِ الْمُسَخَّنِ وَالَّذِي رَوَى عَنْهُ ذَلِكَ لَيْثٌ وَلَيْسَ لِكَرَاهِيَتِهِ لِذَلِكَ مَعْنَى. He says, but it's also been reported to us on the authority of Mujahid that he used to dislike making wudu with water that was boiled. And the one who narrates this from him is Layth, and Layth ibn Sa'd, the Imam of the people of Egypt. But there is no meaning to his disliking this, right? There's no point, or there's no meaning, there's no significance for Mujahid saying that he dislikes using boiled water for making wudu. There's no point, there's no evidence, there's nothing that he's basing it on. فَلَيْسَ لِكَرَاهِيَتِهِ مَعْنَى, right? There's no meaning to him disliking it. What does it mean that Mujahid disliked it? Rahimahullah ta'ala. What does it mean, right? And so him disliking it doesn't make it a religious reality. He goes on to say, and this is where it becomes important, he goes on to say, وَقَدْ أَجْمَعَ كُلُّ مَنْ نَحْفَظُ عَنْهُ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ عَلَى أَنَّ الْوُضُوء غَيْرَ جَائِزٍ بِالْمَاءِ الْوَرْدِ وَمَاءِ الشَّجَرِ وَمَاءِ الْعَصْفَرِ وَلَا تَجُوزُ الطَّهَارَةُ إِلَّا بِمَاءٍ مُطْلَقٍ يَقَعُ عَلَيْهِ اسْمُ الْمَاءِ. Here he's referencing something. And if a person isn't really paying attention, he might miss it. We're talking about making wudu from heated water. And so at the end of that chapter, he says, and indeed there is a consensus there's an ijma' from everybody who we've memorized from them, from the people of knowledge, that wudu is not valid with rose water or tree water or what is that? Asfar is safflower. Yeah, safflower. So he says it's not permissible to make wudu with rose water or tree water or safflower water. And it is not permissible to purify oneself except with actual unrestricted water, when the name water is applicable to it. Why is he mentioning this here? And what does this have to do with boiled water? And what are these things that he's talking about? So the first thing, or let's work backwards. What are these things that he's talking about? Rose water, even though it's called rose water, is not actually water. It's the sap or the liquid that comes out of the rose plant, right? And so although they call it water in Arabic, rose water, it's not actually water. Just like they call a shark the dog of the sea or something like this. It's not actually a dog, right? And so when they say rose water, just because they give it the name water doesn't make it actually water. It's only called water in relationship to it coming from a rose. And so, in common terms and in practical application, it's like when we talk about almond milk. Almond milk is not milk. And for that reason, people can potentially sue over this type of usage, right? Because you can't call almond milk milk because it's not milk. But you can get away with it if you call it almond milk because, okay, that's just the name that people have given it. And so like this, when they talk about rose water, it's not actually water, but you can get away with calling it water in the connection to it being called rose water, but everybody knows it's not actually water. The same thing with tree water. What is tree water? I.e. the sap, the liquid that comes out of a tree when it's a fresh, alive plant or tree. And if you wring the branch or the leaf or the stem, or even if you cut the trunk, you might find a wetness and a moisture inside of it that could either be sap or could be something else. That is what is known as tree water, right? Tapping the tree and getting the liquid out of it. Likewise, saffron water or safflower water is just the water of the safflower. And he says that it is not permissible to make purification with anything other than absolute water. And absolute water, or ma al-mutlaq, it's water that you can, anything that you can call water and not have to qualify it with some other condition. So for example, cold water. Can I call it water and not have to qualify it as being cold water and still be accurate and true? Warm water, rain water, right? Sea water. These are absolute waters. Even though they have descriptions, it's valid to say about each and every one of them that they are water. They are unaltered, unadulterated water. And for that reason, the scholars, when they talk about it, they call it al-ma al-baqi ala khilqatihi, water that has remained the way it was created. And it's valid to say about it water. And the name water itself is applicable to it. And so that's what they mean when they say absolute water or unrestricted water or unqualified water, i.e., it's not qualified and restricted to being the water of something. It is just water, as long as the name water is still applicable to it, meaning it hasn't turned into tea, it hasn't turned into Kool-Aid, it's still actually water, right? Even though it might have other qualifications or things that are describing it, it's still tangibly and actually called water without it being qualified by any other restrictions. Al-ma al-mutlaq, right? Absolute water. And then some people disagree to the extent, if it changes, to what extent is the absolute or the unrestricted, when does the quality, when does the description become a qualification? When does the quality become a qualifier and therefore remove it from its absolute state? But the point is that's what he's talking about. So if that's what he's talking about, if those what the things are, what does that have to do with, or why is he bringing it here? Why is he mentioning this ruling or this consensus as it relates to boiled water? And you can say he's bringing it here for two reasons. And one of them is going to connect to what does it have to do with the conversation at hand. One reason you can say he's bringing it here is a transition to get into his next topic, which we'll cover next time, which is making wudu with flavored water or with wine, right? Flavored water or wine, and we'll use the Arabic term, and nabid, right? And is nabid considered to be absolute water? So it's as if you want to say that this paragraph or this statement of his is more as a transition to the next point, the next conversation. And that could be the case. And, when you look at the chapter organization, then that is relevant and a possibility. Another reason you could say that he presents this statement here in the conversation of heated water, which goes back to the other statement that we mentioned. Why is he bringing it here, and what is its relevance to heated water, is to try to drive home that point that we mentioned earlier, which is heated water is absolutely water, right? It is absolute water. It is unqualified water. Just because it has a description, it is still absolutely water. And the name water is still applicable to it. And so therefore, if there is a consensus that you can't use these other types of waters that are qualified, and there is a consensus that you can use absolute water, then you need to prove that heated water is not qualified water. But you need to prove that heated water or boiled water is qualified water. Prove to me that it is excluded from the consensus. And if you don't have any proof that it is excluded from the consensus, then it remains agreed upon that it is able to be used. And if all you're relying on for your exclusion is this statement of Mujahid, then there's no meaning to what Mujahid said. There's no relevance, right? Who makes Mujahid, rahimahullah, an authority in this issue? And all those who come after. And the reason why they focus on Mujahid is because he's from the Tabi'een, from the Kibar Tabi'een. And so you would need to prove it, you know, everybody who comes after him who might mention that it's disliked. Okay, if Mujahid is the earliest source of this information, then this information is not Quran or Sunnah, or even the statement of the Sahaba. And so you would have to look into all of this to try to prove to me its exclusion from that which is agreed upon regarding absolute water. And so this might be the reason why he's mentioning it here. It could be for transition into the next topic, but it could also be for the point of it's included in the consensus. And if it's included in the consensus, then you needed proof to exclude it. And so it's a roundabout way of saying that it is unanimously agreed that you can use it. And another roundabout way to establish that is unanimously agreed that you can use it is that it is a statement of the Sahaba where there is no known disagreement. And a lot of people consider this to be a consensus. If you have a statement of the Sahaba and there is no known disagreement for something that is knowable or well known, and we know that we can't go outside of the way of the Sahaba, then you treat this as unanimous agreement. And that's a principle in Usul al-Fiqh, right? To not go outside of the way of the Sahaba. And if there's no known disagreement, then whatever was known from them or whatever was knowable from them, then you have to abide by it. And so there is another method of establishing the unanimous agreement of the permissibility of using boiled water. And so the criticism of leprosy or it changing its state and therefore not being absolutely water, or even the argument of the possibility of impermissibility or impermissible substances mixing with it if the fire was fueled with impermissible substances, whether it be the particles of the item itself or the smoke. None of these things are enough to remove it from that consensus. And then as far as if it's too hot to use, then that's a different conversation that isn't related to the quality of the water, but to the completion of the wudu. And completing the wudu is necessary. And so whatever is not able to be accomplished except by establishing its precursor, then the precursor is also necessary. In any circumstance, this is the conversation regarding wudu with heated or boiled water. As we can see, it's not something that's terribly difficult or problematic to wrap one's head around, but it's just awareness of why some of the Salaf might have disliked it. If you read in some of the books where they might dislike, well, yukrah bilma al-mushammis, right? They might call it water heated by the sun, right? And they might treat it as being similar, right? Water that's heated by the sun causes leprosy. Or they might talk about water that has been, changed by the fire, or, going back to, making wudu from anything that the fire has changed. Or they might talk about water that has been heated with the impermissible fuel source, or water that is too hot to correctly perform wudu. These are all categories that this is the foundation for. But at the end of the day, there are tons of Salaf as it relates to the permissibility of using boiled or warm water. So we don't have to have any hardship on ourselves when we go to make wudu in our modern lavatories, when we turn on the warm water and make wudu. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Inshallah, next time we'll try to cover the chapter in totality of making wudu from wine or flavored water, right? Nabith, and we'll talk about what it is in the next chapter. بإذن الله تعالى. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.